Lining up my big axe against your tiny little guys must be very demoralizing for them.
ये जो हमें उखाड़ के फेंक देंगे.
Looks like some good competition this year, yeah?
याद रखना, तुम कहां से आए हो और कहां तक आ चुके हो.
Well, I'm absolutely delighted to have Emily, Shah and Abhay Deol joining me today on Filme Shilmy, and congratulations on Jungle Cry. It's finally releasing.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Emily, just to begin with you, actually, I mean, the fact that Jungle Cry is finally releasing, I think because of the hiccups due to COVID-19, I was initially supposed to release in 2020, but then things just got crazy. And so what kept you determined, I guess, to go for the theatrical release and not opt for an OTT deal, actually? What was that determination factor for you?
Well, for me personally, I just rugby is such a vast sport, and the music that's incorporated and the feel that you get from watching the game being played on a small screen versus a large screen there's a big difference. So I just, I felt like it wouldn't do a lot of justice just by seeing it on a smaller screen or a screen at home. And I think the producers also felt the same way. And so that's why they thought theatrical would be best for a film like this.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I'm glad it's also that's also happening. In fact, Abhay, the film, I believe, is based on 12 underprivileged and orphan kids from Kalinga in India who won the prestigious U14 Rugby World Cup in England. I think in 2007, right? So how aware were you actually of the story prior to getting the film?
This is the thing that surprises most people. It's kind of tragic that nobody knew about it. I didn't know about it when I read the script, but then I thought, okay, well, I don't know about it. Sometimes you're not informed about things, it happens. But then the press, the Indian press too, when we were being interviewed, most of them were like, we'd never heard of this.
Yeah.
So clearly it didn't go far at all. And I am so glad that we were able to make a film on this, because it's an underdog, inspiring story and of people with backgrounds who should be, in the spotlight, whether it is Dr. Samantha, Paul and Rudra, their coaches, and Dr. Samantha started the institute that houses and educates these kids, to the kids who come from these tribal backgrounds and have achieved so much and continue to do so because the institute still exists. So it's there. They had a moment in the sun, which they didn't get. Their moment to shine had come and gone. But that doesn't mean that you can't shine a light on them today.
Sure, definitely. In fact, Abhay, you're known for playing very complex characters. But this is your first time, I think, playing like a sports coach in the film, which I believe is inspired from Rudraksh Jenna. So what was some of your reference points for you as an actor in presenting the character and making it seem as organic and as authentic as possible?
So my director told me, look, we're not going to go. I want you to create a character. While it's based on a real person, but I want you to create a personality. So it's a combination of fact and fiction. The fact is that this guy exists and he coaches these kids, but I want you to come up with something absolutely new for the film. So we came up with a guy who's from Delhi and has moved to this small town. And that's also an often repeated story with people like Rudra as well. And who's kind of like dedicated his life to training these kids. He's passionate about what he does. But you never know. There's something about him that you think, like, you never see his family around. You don't know where he's come from. Why does he do it? Because the film isn't about that. But we had to create a history for him so that we could develop his attitude, his mannerism, his tonality, the way he speaks. So he's estranged from his dad and he's left everything behind. And he's found meaning and purpose by teaching these little kids. What he had ambitions before and what he wanted to be perhaps may have been different at one time, but he's settled in where he is now. But you do see that he's ready to leave when he's asked to train the kids in rugby, because he just feels that that's being, Dr. Samantha's being unreasonable right now, and it doesn't make any sense. And it's only on account of the kids wanting him to stay does he stay back. So you see that he can be feisty, he can fight, he has an opinion, and he can up and leave. But the kids keep him behind.
It seems like it's a very layered character. And I think pretty much like most of the roles that you've done, be it Manorama or Devdi, a lot of them are very layered characters, and there's so many plethora of emotions. But I think, Abhay, when you are playing a role like this as well, or even all the other ones you played, do you have to tap into a certain part of you as a person which is perhaps emotionally vulnerable and broken to bring out those layers effectively on screen as well?
I mean, nicely put, the question. It's always hard for me to describe to people my process, because I essentially come from a space of vulnerability, and how it's about getting there, getting to that vulnerable space, and why. So, for example, when I read a script, I read it first as a story to see, do I like it, do I not, and why is this story even being said? What's the reason for me to listen to this or watch this? Then if I like where it's going, then I look at my character. It's not about my character first. And I say, okay, is this character interesting? Like, okay, I like the story. Doesn't mean I say like the character, but it helps if I like the story. Then if I like the character within that story, I by understanding the graph of a film, of a script, the ups and downs, where it's headed and why it's headed, an understanding of why my character is there, where he comes from, and where he's going, goes alongside with the story. And that's most of the work done. So unless I have to put on an accent or have a body language, a limp or whatever have you, which needs practice or rehearsal, I don't rehearse, because vulnerability, it's easy to be vulnerable when you walk into that set and I haven't mugged up my lines. I have read them, of course. I know what the scene is trying to say. A lot of my process is very much to do with structure and script. I am playing with the film. I'm not playing with the character. And one of my directors told me this, like, you play for the film, you don't play for the character. And it's worked well for me, because the vulnerability can't be rehearsed. Now I'm there and I haven't mugged up the lines. It allows me to let my co-actor, like for example, Emily, to respond to what she does. I'm not expecting her to play it exactly like the way I imagined it. She has her own imagination, and she may or may not repeat the same thing, dialogue, the way she did in the last way. And that allows me to be fluid. That's why I have fun with actors who are not fixed themselves, because I'm not. We tend to discover in the moment what may come about. It also not being so prepared, and then suddenly you have to perform. Then you're like, I better get this together. And that fear of going wrong really builds you up to pull it through, because nothing doing. Now you're here. Does that make sense? I mean, I can't really give you my process. I can keep going on and on and on and about. In a nutshell, it comes from putting myself so vulnerable that it makes me pull together at that moment and then come through. And it's worked for me each time. And that I play to the film. I don't play to the character, which is the best way I can describe it.
Very vividly put. In fact, I think we definitely need a session with you, Abhay, one day to just describe and go through your process, actually. I'd love that one day, hopefully, if we can do that. But I think speaking a bit more about the whole personal connection, I think, with the characters, Emily, you're playing Roshni Thakkar, the sports physio for the team. I mean, given the fact that obviously you have Gujarati roots, you're born and bred in the West, like how I am as well. How close to home was the character for you? Did you also reflect on a lot of personal interactions you've had as well to bring out the essence of the character too?
Roshni Tucker is, as we know, is a character that was brought on into the script that didn't already have to do with the original story. And so we wanted to bring this element of, a character being more warm and having this compassion that was missing throughout the script. And so I do think that there are elements of Roshni Tucker that I really relate to. For one, I always have had a soft spot for kids, and that too, you know, Indian kids, especially the ones that are underprivileged. And Roshni Tucker obviously has that same soft spot. And then there are other elements in the, you know, that I had to create, and moments that she has in her backstory, just like, you know, Rudra or Abhay created for Rudra, we created for Roshni as well. The fact that she's lost touch with her family as well, and so they have kind of have that in common. The fact that she's dealt with loss of such a heavy loss, and how that correlates with her relationship with the boys, which you'll see in the film. So yeah, of course, you know, I've had loss in my life of very close loved ones, and I guess in that sense, I've been able to become more compassionate and understanding to others. So there are similarities between Roshi and I, and then there are, you know, big differences between us as well.
Sure. Will we see you speaking a lot in will we see you speak in Gujarati as well in the film as well?
No, it's only in Hindi because the boys are from Orissa. So yeah, Sukaranu. I didn't get an opportunity to speak in Gujarati, but stop it. Leave me alone. Leave me and all the Gujarati people alone. No, I mean,
now I'm in your life. You're never going to be left alone by me.
yeah, I mean, Gujarati was actually my first language. Then I learned English, and then I learned Hindi. So it's because I grew up with my bandatu in New Jersey, and they obviously only spoke in Gujarati with me. So I'm very comfortable speaking in Gujarati, and I hope that other people speak with me in Gujarati. So if you want to just continue this in Gujarati, and we'll just say bye to Abhay. I'm joking.
No, I understand exactly what we said. I'll switch over to Hindi or Punjabi.
That's true.
We'll be able to get that as well. Don't worry, Abhay. So no one is gonna feel left out in this discussion. That's one thing.
I'm fine with English. It's okay. Yeah.
Great. No, that's wonderful. Now, but
I'm
both
from Bombay. It's my first language.
Oh gosh, no, but it's one. But Emily Sambrine Bowwood's Maja Ivy Sambrine. But you're also the actor and the EP of the film. So I guess how challenging was it to balance both these responsibilities? And I guess, you know, when you are an executive producer, what factors do you consider when actually taking on a film like Jungle Cry?
Obviously, it's a story that needed to be told. You know, I mean, Abhay kind of tapped into that and discussed that a lot, especially throughout our press. It's just something that nobody really had an idea about. And so I felt like it was almost, I don't know, my social responsibility to bring this story to light. And so for that reason, I took it on as an EP. And again, like I said, I read the script and realized that there was not a single female character, which was totally unacceptable. And so we did a little bit of revisions and added a couple of female characters and that element of that feminine touch in a way. But yeah, I mean, on set, you know, I focused most of the time on set, I was able to focus in on acting. We had another EP on there. Her name is Rubina Dode, and she really took over while we were on set. And then my role as an EP came a little bit after we had wrapped and throughout the pandemic, trying to figure things out, figure logistics out. And so I was lucky enough in that sense where I was able to focus more on the acting. And then after we wrapped, pick up the pieces as an EP.
And just on a side note, please, the next film you make a Gujarati film. That would be amazing if you did. Like an American Gujarati movie, I would love that. So please, e vichar karjo ana upar.
Chokas.
Definitely. Wonderful. Now, Abhay, we've seen a lot of biographical Indian films recently based on unsung sports heroes. I mean, recently we had Amitabh Bachchan's Jund, which again was a very, very beautiful film. So I guess the fact that, again, which also talks about how underprivileged, you know, teenagers and kids, they also sort of ended up becoming very huge football stars in that sense, and they sort of, there was an underdog story in that way too. So how do you feel that such movies can actually empower the marginalized society in India?
Well, you know, it's whether India or any other country in the world, sports is really an opportunity, an outlet for the underprivileged, you know, sometimes to get an education even. A lot of poor kids come and get scholarships based on sports and are able to complete an education through it. You could get a career out of it, which will then catapult you to fame and success. You don't have to have an office job, you know, and oftentimes these kids from varied backgrounds tend to be better sportsmen, tend to be out there. They've had such rough lives sometimes that They're fighters, they're survivors. And so, yeah, I think there should be an infrastructure in place of that nature to help, I don't know. The infrastructure needs to be there, and there should be a choice. Like, you could get an education and choose to go into science or business or whatever it is, or okay, you're good at football or rugby or cricket, and then that would be your outlet and vocation, so to speak. Even if there's other infrastructure put into place where you could train other kids, because you have to give energy, you have to invest in your people, and then see what stars come out of it.
Very well said. Very well said. But I think, Emily, I think it's great to see wonderful talents like yourself. From India, we've got obviously Priyanka, who's doing amazing. From UK, we had the Bridgerton girls as well, who are doing some fabulous works on the mainstream front. Obviously, Deepika as well, again, is doing some great work as well from India on the mainstream platform, which is great. But I do think that there's still a lot more room for improvement in terms of accurate Indian representation. So how do you think this can be better, I think, within the next couple of years or within the coming time? What do you think is the need of the hour? Because obviously the fact that you actually are so wonderful and so proud of the roots that you come from. So how do you think that can sort of be influencing the cinema that we see as well going forward?
At the end of the day, cinema is run by these big studios and massive corporations. And I think it starts with the core. I think if you have a very diverse team that is striving to have diversity and to educate the rest of the team based on cultures and traditions, I think it starts there. There's only so much we can do as actors and creators and things of that nature. But these large corporations, I say that because they are, but these large studios, it really starts with them. So when you write, scripts and you have John, James, Freddie, you're gonna get Caucasian men. Right? So you gotta write these. Yeah. So if it's intentionally put that way, then of course the casting director is going to have that mindset when they're casting. If you write a name like, like Abhay or like Priya or whatever the case may be, then of course the casting director is going to switch on that ethnic brain of theirs and, cast appropriately. But with that being said too, I think there's a lot of stereotypes as well, especially with the Indian community, is what Indian should look like. And I think especially in Hollywood, they've taken, the bigger names and they've looked at them and said, oh, okay, this is what Indian should look like. And that's all they're casting. And so it's interesting to see, because it's like, yeah, I speak Gujarati, I speak Hindi, I grew up going even to like the mandir every week. So I'm just as Indian as any other Indian, even though I am half white. I identify with that background more, but because I may not look super Indian, or I may not come off as super Indian, and because of my accent, or my name is Emily, sometimes those opportunities are missed. So I think that, we have to kind of learn to educate and continue to have these conversations.
It's sad, like even with me, sometimes in LA, they don't say, oh, you don't look or sound Indian. And it's like,
see?
Oh, yeah. Oh, really? You faced that? Hold on. Wait, you've actually faced that?
Oh, Abhay faced it. Can you imagine what I'm facing?
What?
I didn't face it on a large scale. I'm just saying it's in that stereotyping of Indian. So like, because I don't talk and sound like this, like a lot of times they're like, oh, you sound really British. Are you Indian? Do Indians sound like that? You must have traveled a lot. And I'm like, actually.
Like, what does that mean? You must have traveled a lot, like what?
Yeah. So it's stuff like that. And then I'm much taller than they expect me to be. I'm fairer than they expect me to be. There's a lot of Latinos that look like this. So that ambiguity, which I think can be used to your advantage. And me and Emily were discussing this, and I was like, well, I think I didn't see the Freddie Mercury biopic, but what's the Egyptian actor's name?
Rami Malek.
Rami Malek apparently did a perfectly fine job. And I'm like, I'm okay with brown people swapping and being the other. If you could pass off and look Indian, but you're Egyptian, sure. If you can be Latino and be vice versa, either way, sure. But
Abhay, wouldn't you agree that that's like an A-list, like for the Rock, for example, he's playing an Egyptian superhero.
At least it's The Rock, and not at least it's not what's his face, Joe Legend from Australia, or like, what was that?
Oh, I get what you're saying, but it's still that happens at an A-list level, like at, you know what I mean? Like it's when you become The Rock, or you know what I mean? So it is tough because it always feels like a constant fight that but it's a good fight that you put up, and you do it because you love make these changes. So we do it because we love it. But yeah, the fight just never stops, does it?
It's weird, like it's layered. Like with Emily, it's the aspect of being half and half. So you're neither this and you're neither that. And with me, it's being understood as Indian, and like, because there's an image of Indian to be a certain way and you don't look like that they don't see the diversity of what being and looking like an Indian and sound like an Indian is like. So there's layers of that. So yeah, like Emily's embedded even further down because she only has one half of it, so to speak. And I'm a part of it, which is not considered or seen as Indian. So
yeah,
it's it's gonna be a while before they get it. Right now, the white male fragility is really sensitive. It's like, oh, straight white men are under attack. So, and then you gotta be like, no, you're fine. You're not under attack. We don't mean to offend you.
I don't know if you signed up to be our therapist, but here you are.
Oh, I'm loving. Right? Please, I'm loving this. This is great content. I love. Please, chalu rakho sab kuch. Mujhe
chalu rakho.
No, but I think it's interesting as well, though, Abhay. I think for you as well, because you've forayed onto the digital space as well. I believe this is perhaps your first, in terms of screen, it's your first like Indian international sort of collaboration that you've been a part of, right? In that sense. So what would you, I think, if you had the opportunity to sort of get more opportunities on the mainstream, what would you like to improve or change regarding the Indian rap in Hollywood?
It's not an answer I can give you in a short span of time. I mean, we kind of, right? And it's not, how much time do you have? I'll give you this example. Like the Disney film that I did in the US was the first Disney film in the US that had an Indian family front and center. And that just says it all. We're in 2022, right? Yeah. And this is the first time they have an Indian American family front and center. I think it was a huge deal for them to have someone like myself play an American and sound exactly like I do, because you could be American having moved there when you were 15 or 18 or 20, and it could be 40 today and sound exactly like you did when you were 20 years old or 18 years old and still be American, like my sisters are. We don't all roll our R's, you know what I mean? So it was, that debate is still pending. Like what's sounding American? What is it? Because when I live in LA, I hear all sorts of accents and they're American citizens.
Yeah.
Now, unless you're required to be a character who was born in the US because it's a historical character, there's a reason to be born and raised there. The biggest advantage, ironically, it's an advantage, but it's not seen yet by Hollywood, when in Canada and the US, is they're the only two countries where you could sound like anything, look like anyone, and still be Canadian or American. You can't have that in India. You can't have that in China. I mean, even Britain to some extent, because it's a much older culture and older country. America is such a new country built by immigrants. And so an American is an immigrant, really. And Hollywood doesn't see that yet. They don't see the advantage in that. They're so provincial in their thinking. They think Hollywood is based in California, it's in LA. But what Hollywood is today, it's seen all over the world and embraced all over the world. You could put anyone in there and people will feel like they're being represented. That's not true of Bollywood. That's not true of Italian cinema, But these countries being young and being built by immigrants and still developing, still becoming a culture, still developing as a culture, have the potential, and having this film industry that's embraced and accepted by all, don't have to belong to a geographical position. They belong to the world. And that's the future of Hollywood. And I hope they realize that while I'm still young.
You're always young and beautiful, Abhay. You're always going to be young and beautiful. Let me
I don't know. Tell me that 20 years from now. So
Arey, I'm telling you, listen, you've got the Deol genes in you, and trust me, you age like fine wine. Okay, I still look at Dharamji, and I'm just like, if I was literally growing up in the 70s, I think he'd be my ultimate crush. I'm telling you, like literally, the Deol genes, they're beautiful. No, but
Thank
it's
you.
very, but I think it's very well said. I think that's what the beauty of Jungle Cry is. I guess it's in a way, I guess, paying homage to the indigenous population, that unfortunately whose voices and whose, the lifestyle has been suppressed a lot by the Western developments and the sort of colonial impacts that they've faced. We're living at a time where even though cinemas have opened up again, but a lot of films that we've been waiting for unfortunately have not done well at the box office, whether it's Bollywood ones or Hollywood ones. And it's very difficult to, I guess, determine what to do. I mean, for you, especially Emily, as an EP and as an actor of AU, how tough is it to gauge what the audience's demand is, and how difficult is it for you to tell what's going to do well or not?
You can literally never gauge that ever. There are things or films and shows that I am obsessed with. And then I come to India and they're like, "Na bakwas hai yaar." And then this is here. The things that they love here, they hate in America. It tanks. So, I mean, everywhere in the world, you're going to find somebody that loves your content. That's for any form of content that you create. So there's no way of gauging it. All you can do in this industry is make films that you personally love and you're passionate about. And if people see that passion and see that love for it, that'll usually draw them in.
Brilliant. And Abhay, did you want to give an input? Because obviously you've worked immensely a lot in Hindi cinema, and a lot of the films you've worked on as well are quite a dynamic style of films, not your typical commercial pot boilers. I mean, aside from Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, of course. But what would you like to say about this as well, with this uncertainty?
So look, I mean, I act and I'm a producer as well. So
exactly.
My journey started with taking on the powers that be. My journey, I mean, right from the beginning. I mean, the reason why I found a place in this industry, ironically, was by taking it on. I was making movies that nobody wanted to make. They believed that they wouldn't work. Even the acting, the idea of a mainstream hero, a hero in a Hindi Bollywood film, was someone who was flawless and untouchable, an ideal Superman. And I was playing flawed characters. I was playing real people. I was portraying real situations and trying to bring out the heroism of the everyday man. And that was unheard of when I was doing it. So my whole life in this industry and as an actor has been countering the mainstream narrative. So I learned eventually over time that it's not just about making a good product, but about marketing and selling it. So for example, a film like a Manorama had 60 screens and 25 lakhs marketing behind it. Nobody was playing. It became a cult hit. I mean, the amount of times I've heard, "Oh my God, it's a cult hit." So many of my films. I mean, it's nice, don't get me wrong, but a cult hit essentially means it didn't work on the theaters. So you didn't get any work, but over time, people are like, "Oh my God, you were so good." But it didn't get me the next job that easily, or it didn't expand on the production value of the next job that I could do. And when something I did that was offbeat that did do well, I was getting offers to do that again. And the irony was the only reason why it worked was because I did something you haven't seen before. And as a studio, you can't put a number to something you haven't seen before. And studios didn't put a number behind those films that they hadn't seen before. That did well. And then they wanted me to do that again because they'd seen it now and they'd seen the number it gave. And I was like, well, I was like, well, the formula is that it wasn't seen before. So if you want to repeat the formula, it's investing in something that you haven't seen before. And then they were like, no, we can't do that. I'm like, ironically, you turned that last project down, which has done well. And this is why you'll always be salaried employees in a suit behind a desk. thinking,
Right.
you're creative. So Emily's laughing.
That's what you mean. I guess that's why it's important to be innovative, I think is what you're trying to say, Abhay, and to make sure that you keep bringing stories that are dynamic, that are different, not just following the status quo of
Yeah,
what.
I mean, for me, it's like when things don't do well or do well, I'm so like now beyond looking at validation and success, because it's my effort has always been, and just let me make it. Let me, and please put your money behind releasing it at least. Success is, whether it succeeds or not, is such a faraway dream. And then when something does well or not, like I wish everybody success.
Mm.
And so things are not going well now for people because they're conforming to the mainstream narrative and mindsets are changing. I hold myself back from going, I told you so, because I don't want to be that guy saying, I told you so. That's annoying. So I just
Yeah.
go, and I'm like, yeah, I'm so sorry, it didn't do well. I didn't see it coming.
The sarcasm in that, I tell you. No, but I think it's I think Jungle Cry is really, I think on a final note, just to wrap up, because we've run out of time, sadly, but I think you both actually represent that underdog spirit that I think Jungle Cry really does revolve around. And I think it's so wonderful for me as an Indian, based in the UK, to see and hear such a story. I think it's very, very empowering. I'm very much looking forward to seeing this film. I mean, as it is, I'm absolutely in awe of both of you and the crafts that you've had as artists, and I can't wait to watch the film, actually, and I can't wait to see you both collaborate again, hopefully on another project soon.
Fingers crossed.
Lovely.
If he can tolerate me again.
Any day. Any day.
Lovely. Well, thank you. Well, Emily and Abhay,
Thank
thank you so much for joining me on Filme Shilmy. It
Thank
was
you.
so lovely to chat with
Thank
you
you.
both, and
Thank
hopefully
you.
see you guys soon.
Hopefully, yes.
Sure.
Take care.
Lovely.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.